Warlocks in D&D have awesome, if often sometimes a bit edgy backstories. Making a deal with a powerful, unknowable entity in exchange for power is about as classic fantasy as you can get, and yet, at the table, it sometimes falls flat. Today's question is brought up by Burmy4, who asked if I could go into a little more detail on how to make a Warlock Pact interesting and fun at the table. Thanks, Burmy, and thanks to our 10th class supporters who decide every week what it is that I'm going to muse on. Why are Warlock Pacts boring? I think that part of the reason that Warlock Pacts fall short is because they have so much potential for greatness, but at the same time, they're very different than any other choice that you might make in the creation of a character. A lot of the times, your backstory in D&D is sort of secondary and background, as you might sort of expect, compared to the story that's happening at the table right now. So when you create yourself a wizard, a fighter, a rogue, your backstory might be put into play as part of your campaign, but often it will just be the background and the backstop that helps you decide how your character would react to certain situations. Whereas for a warlock, the decision to enter into the service of some powerful creature is very much on par with like a cleric's decision to serve a deity, and yet warlocks don't come with the same kind of built-in guidance that checking out one of the deities of your campaign setting is going to give you as to what kind of dogma you should be following, what kind of beliefs you should hold, and how you should play that out at the table. Warlocks intrinsically are designed to be a class that builds off of their backstory and involves that into a lot of their decision making, but they don't have the same kind of support that you get for a cleric or a paladin who has a set oath or has dogma of their deity to be able to follow and enjoy. And so for me, that I think is one big reason why warlocks fall flat. The other is that by creating a warlock, much like by playing a cleric or a paladin, a lot of DMs don't involve at the table those powerful creatures that are providing the source of energy that is being used by the characters. And so when we separate that out and the deity is just this unknowable creature somewhere out somewhere, or the patron is just a background piece that doesn't ever impact your campaign, then it's bound to get boring fast, particularly when, let's be honest, Eldritch Blast every round is not as exciting as it could be for the warlocks, even if it results in some of the best damage dealing options for single target killing available to spellcasters. So how can we make warlocks more interesting? There's pretty much two obvious focuses and two things that need to be kept in mind when designing the deal and the pact that are taking place between a warlock and their patron. And that's the motivation of the character and the motivation of the patron itself. We don't often go into that sort of detail from the patron side. It's pretty common for the player to be cognizant of the fact that if they made this dark deal with some otherworldly power, they needed to be getting something out of it. And though sometimes it's just, I got more power, sometimes it's also more targeted towards, I want the strength to be able to avenge my brother, or, some other motivation that drove them to make the choice to essentially sign their soul into Hawk in order to gain power. Player motivation is vital. That character has some reason why they want to be a warlock, and it's a great question to ask your player, or for the player to ask themselves about, why did I want to be a warlock? Why am I willing to make this deal, even though it's going to come with constraints and costs, and I know that I'm going to be put into service to some powerful entity? Asking that question up front is super important. But the DM likewise needs to be thinking about what the Warlock's patron is getting out of that relationship. We tend to just hand wave this and assume that there's some value to having minions that a Warlock patron feels, but we don't necessarily bring it out into our game world. And Warlocks are a great opportunity for us to enhance our gameplay and enhance the motivation and the excitement at the table by drilling down into what it is that the patron wants from that Warlock. Why have they got them set up to go out there into the world? Are they imprisoned somehow and they're looking to be freed? Do they want to expand their base of worship and need factors in the world that are going to go out and convince people to also serve them so that they can build up followers in some kind of arms race against another entity of similar power? Are they looking to corrupt the souls of mortals because they gain power from those souls that are put in hoc to them? Whatever the reason might be, figuring out what the Warlock is going to get out of it and what the patron is going to get out of the deal is vital to making a good deal. When it comes to making the deal itself, I find a lot of inspiration from the devilish, I think they call it diabolical deals that are in Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. You can utilize that sort of framework to build out the agreement that was made between the Warlock and its patron so that you can know a few more of the details of what they're asking. Is there a clause that allows the Warlock to escape the bondage that they've put themselves in if it's too onerous? What is the cost for them disobeying their patron if their patron is telling them to do something? What is the cost if the patron doesn't follow through, and how important is it to the patron to keep this Warlock serving them and down the driven path? The diabolical deals section, or devilish deals, can give you a lot of framework to figure that one out, and just for me gives lots of inspiration. Making an awesome pact leads to making an awesome Warlock relationship between the patron and its Warlock. And relationship is really another of the keys that I think we miss as opportunities as the Dungeon Master. The best Warlocks that I've had in my games are those Warlocks whose patrons have been involved in their everyday adventuring. For instance, I had a genie Warlock who had a pact with 4 different genies, one of each of the standard elemental types. And at any given time, this Eladrin would be in the season associated with his genie, and thus would be in the bargain with that specific genie. And whenever they returned to their genie vessel, one or more of their patrons would be able to view in through the windows and communicate with the Warlock. This provided a huge amount of fun throughout the course of the campaign and allowed the patrons to vie for their Warlock's attentions. They had a reason to want to convince him to utilize their power and to serve in their ways. Each of them wanted more followers or wanted riches gathered to their name or their name spread throughout stories. They had their own individual motivations, and each of those motivations was in play to push and pull the Warlock into their service. The Warlock had power because of the bargain in place so that they could say, well, I need this, which one of you will provide it for me, and in exchange I will serve under your banner for X number of days and will do what you ask instead of performing under the banner of one of your rivals. And that whole dynamic was probably the best Warlock experience that I've ever had because it was constant. It had motivations for the Warlock as well as the patron. Both of them had power and opportunity to bargain with one another. And essentially, the dynamic was just so much more fun. We really lose out when we don't involve deities and patrons in our campaigns by having them be a real and present force that whispers in their dreams or is viewable from their genie vessel, by not having them speak to the warlock with questions and queries, with desires and motivations, and try to push them forward towards a specific path. We just rip a lot of the flavor out of the warlock and make it just a backstory instead of a feature piece of our campaign. By making it that feature piece and involving them in the everyday adventure, we can really level up Warlock's Fun, and I am pretty positive that others around the table were also enjoying those scenes, and they're going to start to want those kinds of interactions with former mentors or with patrons or with deities for themselves. By sharing that out and building it into our campaigns, we just build a better world and a better game. So when you are faced with a warlock who wants to be just a hexblade dip, give them that opportunity to interact with the sentient weapon that is driving their bargain forward, and start to think a little bit about what that power wants from the warlock, and add some reason and flavor to the character instead of just leaving it lying flat and leaving all of that potential out there for somebody to just have an edgy background that is edgy for the sake of edge. Thanks very much for watching. If you have any questions that you would like me to muse upon, then leave them in the comments below. But if you want to tell me what to muse upon, then click the join button, sign up as a tank class supporter, help keep the lights on and the editing leveling up here. And thanks so much for watching today. Happy adventuring.